Today is Sunday, February 23rd, 2020, and this is Flashpoint. Hi, welcome to Flashpoint. Good to have you with us. It was another busy political week on the national scene, from that vigorous and at times nasty Democratic debate Wednesday night to the sentencing of Roger Stone on Thursday. But this morning, we're once again going to set aside the national view for one that is dialed in on our fair peninsulas. Those peninsulas are filled with challenges for Governor Whitmer, especially the highways and byways that traverse them. Fixing the roads was, of course, Gretchen Whitmer's campaign centerpiece. And after no-fault reform, there seemed to be promise for partnerships between the governor's office and the legislature. That relationship now seems quite fractured, and the governor's trying to go around them to fix the roads with bonds. But that's just one concern, though perhaps the biggest. She's also got a long list of environmental worries, rising lake levels that are putting big chunks of Michigan right into the water. She's also still facing criticism for her budget tactics. Some felt they were leaving some very vulnerable Michiganders in peril so that she could make a point. But she also had a very high-profile moment and pretty strong reviews in delivering the Democratic response to the State of the Union address, highlighting Michigan's electoral importance this year, perhaps her own as well. Governor Whitmer is here this morning to talk about all of that. And are we doing primaries the right way, especially when it comes to Michigan? Congresswoman Debbie Dingell calling again for change. She's here too, all today on Flashpoint. Well, you have seen a lot of the governor lately, her State of the State address, the unveiling of her budget, and of course, delivering the Democratic response to the State of the Union address. And now this morning, you're going to see a little more of her because she's back with us on Flashpoint. Governor, thank you very much for being here. It's good to see you again.
It's good to see you too.
You were a regular on this program for a while back in your previous life. And I want to take you a little bit back to a previous life, at least it feels that way. This was the picture from the porch of the Grand Hotel on Mackinac Island at the conference. This is last May. This is you and what felt like the entire state legislature, along with Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist. Everybody here, it was such this moment of ecumenicalism, everybody coming together over no-fault reform. And I think you all even talked about the promise that it held for working together. What's happened?
Well, you know, I think that it was a great moment. I think we will bear the fruit of the work that was done this summer when everything kicks into gear. You know, obviously, since then, my hope was that we would transition from Mackinac Island around no fault to fixing the dam roads. That was the representation everyone made publicly at that bill signing. And yet, you know, I never got any sort of a reaction out of the legislature in terms of an alternative to the solution that I put on the table.
Well, there have been reactions from the legislature,
but not a serious alternative or a counter offer. You know, I led with a gas tax. It was not easy to do. It was not fun to lead. But I did what I said I was going to do when I ran. We are going to fix the dam roads. And I put a solution on the table, and the legislature never got serious about either debating the merits of mine or putting an alternative of their own on the table.
You can see a kind of a test that this would be for conservatives to be told that we're gonna vote for the highest gas tax in the country. That's almost just against their fiber, their being, and how they got elected. You can see why that might not be the answer to them, can't you?
Oh, sure. But you know what? I can also see that they're out there saying that the roads are the #1 issue, and they want to solve it, and so get serious by putting an alternative on the table, and they never did that. And I think that's the frustration that people across our state have when government breaks down that way, when people don't really come to the table and they're given these leadership roles and these important responsibilities, and they don't come forward with some serious alternatives. And that's what I was always hoping that the legislature would do.
Well, it's broken down all right. We devolved from that picture into quite a bit of name calling that's been going on back and forth to the point now where you basically are saying you don't need the legislature. And I found myself, when I heard you kind of alluding to that, wondering how Minority Leader Gretchen Whitmer would have reacted to a governor saying, I don't need you, I'm going around you.
Well, let me say a couple things on that. Name calling going back and forth is not accurate. Names have been hurled my way, but I don't respond in kind. Number two, when it comes to, working with the legislature, I've never said that they don't matter. They do. We still need a long-term funding solution for our roads. But we cannot wait for that to happen. We have to start moving dirt right now, starting to bend the curve on deterioration. So bonding actually is a really thoughtful and wise way of financing some of these long-term projects. And people in Southeast Michigan are going to see a lot of work getting done starting this year, and we have to get started.
There's no getting around, though, that it's debt without a way to necessarily pay for it, correct?
So it is a responsible mechanism for starting to move some dirt now. I do need the legislature to come to the table with a serious funding option so that we can not just fix trunk lines, but can fix local roads as well. That's on them, but I'm not waiting to get started.
Every time I host a conversation on this program about the roads, I am deluged by emails from people who say that the clear problem in Michigan is that we have the highest weight limit for trucks. 164,000 pounds is the highest by far, in some cases across the country, and that we are not going after the people properly who are really causing all the damage on our roads.
I recognize that our weight limits are an issue, and I've said regularly, let's work on that. But that is not the sole problem that we have as a state. We have underfunded our roads for decades in Michigan. We've been putting temporary patches or layers over roads that really should have been reconstructed. And now it's so bad that just this week, a woman was driving in the Lansing area and a chunk of a bridge came through her windshield and hit her in the face. This is what we're really dealing with, and this is decades of underfunding. And so just changing weight limits isn't going to change the fact that we have underfunded for decades, and that's why it's going to take revenue to fix the problem.
The tactic that you're taking, while it moves you around the legislature, though, it does leave a lot of folks in rural Michigan feeling like they're being left out, that their roads need help too, and because of the way that this is constructed, you can really only handle, it seems to be largely urban area roads with this plan.
Well, the fact of the matter is, when we go through bonding, I can only, use those dollars on state trunk lines.
Right.
I can't fix the local problem. And I was very clear about that in the State of the State and in the budget, that this is not a funding solution. This is financing so that we can mend the roads that are the most heavily trafficked, that impact the most Michiganders and that are in the worst conditions. And that's why you'll see 275 and I-96 as a part of the initial wave. That road that the chunk of the bridge came out, that is in the bonding plan as well. So we are going to do what I can unilaterally, but ultimately anyone who's unhappy about their local roads needs to tell their legislature to get serious and put a plan out.
This leads us quite nicely into the problem that we have with what's going on with our lake levels. We also, Lord knows where this is going for roads. We're watching up in the thumb as some roads are now degrading because the water is taking the road out from underneath them. Do we think we have a really good understanding of what these rising lake levels are doing to the state and how many millions and millions of dollars this is costing us?
Well, not just in roads, but also in combined sewer operations, also in shoreline erosion, in tourism.
And of course, private property that's being washed away.
I was in Bay County not long ago, and Joe Rivet, who is the Bay County Drain Commissioner, said they anticipate having 75 square miles of land that is usually farmable and livable underwater this year. And these 1 in 100-year events are happening annually. So we have to acknowledge that climate change is real, that the globe continues to heat. We didn't have a thorough freeze this winter, which means we are absolutely saturated and water is nowhere to go. And as we see, all of these different challenges, the roads are impacted as well. And so this is going to be an incredible challenge for us as a state, and that's why in the budget that I promoted, we are focusing on trying to help local communities meet these needs, but there's only so much we can do as state government.
You put forward $64 million for environmental initiatives, and we clearly have a lot. We're watching this deluge of environmental problems that have broken out, many of them in Southeast Michigan along the Detroit River, up the green ooze problem that we've seen. And I think there's an awful lot of confusion as to exactly who's supposed to be carrying the ball here. Eagle sometimes points at the EPA sometimes points at Eagle. Do we have a handle on who's in charge? Where does the buck stop?
I'd say, I mean, we all have a responsibility here. There's no question. And for the last 8 years, the EPA and DEQ, which was Eagle before it became Eagle, had a very contentious relationship. And now we are really trying to mend that ugly past and try to make sure that we're all rowing in the same.
As an emailer said to me, though, recently, new name, same lousy agency.
Well, that's not, I don't think that's fair, because the people at Eagle are incredibly hardworking. They are doing what they can with the resources that they have. But I want to highlight
that's the better
something.
problem.
The legislature right now is debating a bill that takes money, it's the bottle bill, and it takes money from our ability to react to emergencies like green news. So while everyone is upset about the green news, and legitimately so, and this is decades in the making, it spans more than one administration, to be sure.
Thank goodness the ooze showed up, or we wouldn't
have been able to know that it was there, much less addressing it. But the legislature right now is moving legislation that takes money out of our ability to have quick response. We actually need to be putting more resources into our ability to do that, and they're trying to starve it, which just makes this problem that much worse.
Got to get to a break. Got a lot more we want to talk about. We'll continue our conversation with Governor Gretchen Whitmer on Flashpoint on Local 4.
Always there for you. Come experience the Gowling difference at Gowling Alfa Romeo of Birmingham.
Lease a 2019 Alfa Romeo Giulia Sport with all-wheel drive for just $329 a month. Or cruise off in the 2020 Alfa Romeo Stelvio with all-wheel drive for $419 a month. Don't wait. Hurry into Gowling Alfa Romeo of Birmingham today on Woodward, just south of Maple, and at alfaromeoofbirmingham.com.
You're looking at United Shore, one of the fastest growing companies in Metro Detroit. From the moment you step foot on its campus, you understand why United Shore is a one-of-a-kind workplace. And that goes well beyond the 1.5 million square foot state-of-the-art campus and its many convenient perks. Home to the #1 wholesale mortgage lender in the nation, UWM, United Shore is a company where people can build a career. Just ask the more than 2,000 team members promoted over the last 2 years. You heard that right. They don't have employees. They have team members, nearly 5,000 to be exact. Everyone engages you and welcomes you into a culture that's more like family, built on thoughtfulness and friendship. The office layout is open, just like the doors of the company's leaders. Fundraisers and volunteering are commonplace. Meetings aren't allowed on Thursdays. And there's a long-standing commitment to a firm 40. That's a 40-hour work week and the promise of having time to have a life. Sound like a place that could work for you? Go to unitedshore.com to learn more.
Black history is American history, and Local 4 News today is celebrating Black History Month, and we have a little of everything this month.
Yeah, we really do. Highlights, there's special events around town. You can also meet local people who have made an impact.
Get interesting history, facts, and more on Local 4 News today, and click on Detroit.com.
Live, breathe, love sports. Well, so do we. So catch the highlights and inside talk on Sports Final Edition tonight after Local 4 News.
Welcome back to Flashpoint. My conversation this morning with Governor Whitmer. You had that crazy span of 3 weeks where all of this stuff was piled together, but it was interesting, the juxtaposition between your State of the State address, where you talked about the improving picture in Michigan, the unemployment rate, manufacturing jobs. A couple nights later, when you talked about the economy as part of the Democratic response to the State of the Union, you seem to be criticizing what was going on economically. Can you have it both ways?
Well, I think if you listen closely to the State of the State, I did talk about how we still have 43% of our population below the ALICE standards, the United Way ALICE standards. That means 2 out of every 5 people in your neighborhood are really struggling to meet their basic needs of their family. And so you heard me talk about auto jobs, and we celebrate those, but we still have to acknowledge that we've got challenges ahead to make sure that people have opportunity to upskill, to get into unfilled, good-paying jobs right now, because we have that skills gap, to ensure that our kids are getting the education that they need. I mean, these are the fundamentals that are still true here in Michigan. I talked about them both in my State of the State and in the State of the Union.
But you get the point that the celebrations are yours, the challenges are President Trump's.
No, I think that the celebrations are all of ours, and the challenges as well are all of ours. And I did both in both speeches, I think. And it was important to me. It wasn't an Trump speech. It was about a vision for America. And I highlighted great things that are happening that are being done in various states across our nation.
You still are coming under quite a bit of criticism for the line item, a number of the line item vetoes. And a lot of people understand that you were trying to make a point with that. Now that the budget's come out, there has been some money that's gone back to Pure Michigan. But for instance, the autism community still feels like you've left them hanging. In fact, I was emceeing the night that you were at the Autism Alliance speech, and you kind of told them, you promised their support, as they had come to expect, I think, under Lieutenant Governor Calley, and then they find themselves a little high and dry. I think there's a lot of people that felt like they were having their lives played with so that you could make a point to the legislature.
Well, if anyone feels like that, that's unfortunate, and it's not true. The fact of the matter is, I didn't use vetoes to make a point. I used vetoes to balance a budget and to do the hard, important work that state government does of keeping people safe. The budgets that the legislature sent me, they wouldn't negotiate with me and sent me budgets that just took $50 million out of the corrections budget. Just took it out, like there are savings there. That's closing a prison without a plan about what you do with the population. Took $50 million out of our health care budget without funding their own Medicaid work requirements. I had to cobble together every general fund dollar that I could in order to do those fundamentals and to not, pull people off of health care or close prisons without a plan for what you do with returning citizens. And so I did what I had to do to make the budget make sense. We ultimately negotiated to get those dollars back into those departments, which gave us the ability to fund things like the autism line. And that's important. My original budget had that in it. Because the legislature's shenanigans, I had to fix it. It ended up with it in it, and it's also is reflected in the budget that I introduced. And so I think people see that those really are the values that I have.
I want to make sure we get to the education piece of this. You put quite a bit of money for, especially I think a lot of teachers saw that you were thinking about the fact that so many of them spend so much money out of their own pockets, and you're trying to help them with that. But I want to get to this reading problem that we have. The new law that went into effect in 2016 shows us that we got about 5,000 third graders who are in danger of being held back because they're not meeting. And you're being accused of finding a way around that law so that we're kind of making sure that we don't have that many people failing. Wasn't that of course we can always change the standards, but the point of the law, wasn't it, was we got to make sure that people are reading at the level they need to. If they fail and can't make it, well, that's the standard we agreed to.
The goal of the law is to make sure kids read. However, the punitive nature of it is actually going to do a disservice to the children of Michigan. When you hold a child back, that has lifetime consequences. On top of it, they didn't wrap kids with the kinds of support they need to be successful. So not only is this law going to have a lifetime effect on these children, it means that parents don't have information so they can make the best choice for their own child, which is what we're trying to remedy. And we're trying to ensure that
But a
kids have
disagreement
the
with a
support
law
they
means
need to be
changing a
successful.
law rather than flouting it, doesn't it?
And one other, outcome of this law is that it disproportionately hurts kids of color. And so there are a lot of problems with this law. I'm working with the Skillman Foundation and the Max Fisher Foundation to educate parents, to wrap kids with the supports they need to be successful. It's not about flouting the law. It's about empowering parents and ensuring that kids are successful, not just penalized for a system that hasn't been prioritized to meet their needs.
Lastly, we've had Secretary Benson on a couple of times to talk about our readiness for the elections. Are you concerned about our ability to handle all of the absentee ballots that are now legal and eligible without changing the way that we calculate them?
Well, I am. I know that there is been some discussion about, with these early ballots, perhaps they can start opening maybe a day in advance so we can have timely results. I understand that the Senate Majority Leader is opposed to that. I do think it's going to be a challenge, but I have great confidence in Secretary Benson.
Governor, it was always good to have you here. I've got many more things, so we will have you back again, hopefully, in the near future.
I hope so.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Thanks.
We'll bring Debbie Dingell in, the Congresswoman, would like to change the Michigan primary. We'll talk about it next on Flashpoint.
Is your house cold and drafty? Are your energy bills through the roof? With Michigan's winter being so unpredictable, you cannot afford not to insulate your home another winter. Stop bleeding money. Insulate your walls and attic. Cut your energy bill up to 50% with Ace & Sons.
They said it couldn't be done. This weekend, Gardner White beats Gardner White, and you win. Score never-before epic sale price cuts plus instant cash rebates. That's savings on top of savings. But don't wait. This is the final weekend. To get an extra $100 back for every $500 you spend and save again, we pay your tax.
We want your business.
Don't be fooled by so-called sales. And don't overpay. Hurry in and save. Get an epic steal with no tax and same-day delivery. Sunday and Monday, only at Gardner White.
Ready to purchase your first home? Not only will Hall Financial get you pre-approved same day, we're going to connect you with a top realtor in your area. Call 248-308-5000 or chat with us at davidhallmortgage.com.
Did you know that nearly every client who's retained a lien Ponto has received a recovery? If you've been in an accident, you're probably asking yourself a lot of questions. Was I at fault? Do I deserve compensation? Who do I call?
And those are all great questions for your lawyer. Call your lawyers at Lien Ponto, because the truth is, no one's going to tell you what you deserve better than us. Call 855-75-EP-LAW, because if you don't win, we don't win.
Tonight at 11, it's a story that's dangerously common.
Comes up in his fancy car and tells me I'm beautiful.
A vulnerable teenager, a man she thought she could trust, and then
all of a sudden appointments are being made for me in hotel rooms.
A human trafficking victim tortured, now with a shocking admission.
The next turn will leave you stunned.
So I decided that my only way out was to kill him.
And that's just the beginning. Tonight on Local 4 News at 11.
Welcome back. We are just a little more than 2 weeks from the Michigan Democratic primary. Its position remains a source of frustration to many. It has long been the burr under Debbie Dingell's saddle, and the Congresswoman is back with us this morning to talk about that and other matters. Congresswoman, good to have you back on Flashpoint.
Good to be
when
here.
When you first came on Flashpoint 27 years ago, I think then we were talking about, you were a Democratic National Committee member, and I think then we were talking about your frustration with the way the primary process worked. And here we are this many years later, and it's still the same. Your frustrations have not abated.
Well, they've not abated, and I'm really doing this in honor of Carl Levitt. When I first started doing this, Carl identified this at 30 years ago, that this was a problem, that two small, disparate states should not have such an impact on the presidential nominating system. And I had said we need to start at the beginning of the game. We can't keep changing we can't change the rules in the middle of the game. 2008 was the ugliest fight that I have ever seen. We did not win. It was a bipartisan effort. This is something there are Republicans who feel as strongly as I do, because there were people that turned it into a partisan candidate issue instead of looking at.
That's always going to be part of it, isn't it?
Well,
Everybody's going to be looking for where the advantage is.
I swear to God I'd never touch it again after 2008. But after what happened in Iowa, I am back. I am building a coalition. I have talked to all the players here in Michigan. I'm going to try to get reelected to the DNC just to take this fight on. I stepped down because I wanted the party to be broader, but Iowa, it was just one more thing that contributed to people's lack of confidence in an electoral system. But
Do you want Michigan to be first?
No, I want to make that clear. It may take Michigan going first the first time, because you have to have a state that's got a backbone. And we were prepared last time. Somebody who was working for a candidate snuck language in. I learned a lesson that allowed a candidate to take their name off the ballot. Those of us who were working on it together, the chair of the Republican Party, Senator Levin, and I, we did not have a candidate. We were trying to change the system. It's so confusing. But anybody watching this program needs to understand that New Hampshire and Iowa have too big an impact on who's going to be our nominee.
Well, Iowa only had an impact this year in chaos, I guess.
But there's chaos. We need a system that gives everybody the opportunity to go first.
Well, what about a system that allows someone like Mayor Bloomberg now to skip a couple of states and spend his way in? And now we're hearing rumors about John Kerry. I mean, the system is flawed in ways other than just where the states are, isn't it?
Oh, it's much more than that. I mean, but here's what people don't understand is how complicated the primary nominating system is. Both of the parties set rules, And then in order to seat delegates, by the way, they always say we're not going to seat your delegates, any presidential candidate. You can't win a presidency without Michigan, so you're going to go ahead and seat your delegates, which is another false threat. But we've got to look at the whole system and look at the issues. But each state sets its own rules. DNC, RNC sets rules, each state sets its own rules, and presidential candidates work those rules to win the nomination.
Sure, which we would expect them to continue to do, no matter what the rules end up
I'd like
being.
to fix the system, but I'm not that talented.
I don't want to let you go without talking about a development this past week where the story was reported that the president sort of blew up at his national intelligence director for briefing Congress on continued attempts by Russia to influence our election, not only from the last time, but of course working on it this time again. And it has caused an uproar, a change, a shuffling of national security personnel. What's your reaction to it?
I have several reactions to it. First of all, I think that our national security should not be partisan. I think it should be tantrum-proof, and that we all have to work together. We've got to keep this country safe. Then you hear later in the week, the Friday, that he's got 4 candidates. He's going to get good one. This isn't American Idol either. We need a strong person who's going to tell us the truth. And I want to work with the president. I want to work with him to keep our nation safe. People are wondering about whether they can trust the integrity and have confidence in our electoral system. That's something that's very important. I think the president's concerned that if people think Russia's interfering in the election, that it means he didn't have a valid election. Well, Mr. President, help us convince the American people that we need to ensure that we have a safe and secure electoral system, and we shouldn't be allowing foreign governments to interfere, and we need to have systems that prevent it from happening, and let's work together on it.
I've got just a couple seconds left. What do you suppose the likelihood is that we will head to a brokered convention for the DNC this year?
Better than 50-50.
Better than 50-50. The unicorn that political reporters have been waiting to cover since 1952 was the last one. So we'll be watching. Congresswoman, it's always good to have you back on the program. Thanks for being here, and thank you for being here as well. Meet the Press is coming up next, right after Mitch Albom's Heart of Detroit, and I hope we will see you next Sunday morning right back here